KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and standing by to join me is author Robin Merle. We're going to talk about her new book, Involuntary Exit, A Woman's Guide to Thriving After Being Fired. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here with you.
I saw your book and I thought, this is so important, especially right now. Here we are, 80 plus weeks into the pandemic. So many people have been hit so hard, that's an understatement. How did the book come about for you?
So I actually wrote the book pre-pandemic, and it came about based on my own experience and the experience of dozens of women that I interviewed who had experienced sudden job loss, didn't see it coming, and then had to regroup. And obviously the pandemic had the same effect on so many of us, women and men. And whereas before I was dealing with the whole concept of uncertainty, women were suddenly thrust into this world where they didn't know what was going to happen next, and they didn't know how to embrace the unknown and really thrive in it. The pandemic actually did the same thing on a massive scale. People were thrust into a new world. They didn't know how to navigate it. They needed help. And I found this out when I interviewed a therapist who had a clinical practice that saw a lot of people who were reeling from job loss. And she said, not knowing their next steps really had people on edge, but there was also a silver lining to the pandemic, and that people were able to step back because they weren't churning day after day, reflect on what was really important to them, and in many cases, change their path. And so we're seeing some of the result of that in the Great Resignation.
Yes.
People are leaving, they're redefining themselves, entrepreneurship is up. And I will tell you, for the women that I interviewed before the pandemic, it was the same process. They realized they had to step back, reflect, reinvent, and really figure out what their value was and how they wanted to live their days.
Sure. Well, it really takes a mental, emotional, and financial toll, and you touched on that in the book.
It certainly does. The book is divided into 4 parts that cover all of those aspects. So the first part is called The Loyalist's Guide to Betrayal. And it really focuses on those of us who have worked so long and so hard for an organization, and only to find ourselves no longer with that organization.
Yeah. And
it deals with the emotional trauma of that loss and sets the stage, because it is a grieving process.
Sure,
many of us have very strong relationships with people that we've worked with for hour after hour, year after year. And we're all familiar with the stages of a grieving process, but I felt that the stages of grieving for children was more relevant to the kind of bullying that I heard about from people who had lost their jobs. And so the 4 stages are shock and numbness, yearning and searching, disorientation and disorganization, and finally reorganization and resolution. And I found that for all of the women that I spoke with, they all had to go through that process of emotional healing.
Sure.
And those who had enough financial strength to do that without taking another job or being most concerned about finances really did a wonderful job of taking the time and finding the resources to help them get through that and to come out better and stronger on the other end. And those that did need the financial resources, my advice was always make sure that you can compartmentalize every day and really think about your next move, think about what you want, think about your own value.
Yeah. I had someone give me some great advice one time recently in the pandemic. He said, stop thinking so much about work, your freelance things. Take some time off. Let your mind rest, because in those moments of rest, you will kind of tap into yourself, your emotions, your next step, maybe connecting with someone you haven't connected with, or a networking
Right.
thing. And it
Mhm.
worked. I felt
Yeah.
rejuvenated come Monday morning.
Yeah. And it's not a habit we're used to doing. I
No,
mean, when we're in an organization, we're so set on setting our goals, thinking about our goals, how we're going to get to those, measuring our goals, reporting on what we've done.
right,
We never think of doing that for ourselves. Oh, what would happen if Janine sat down? She set some Janine goals, and then she had metrics against them. And then she thought about how she was doing, and she realized, oh, she hadn't taken time to really think about herself
right,
for 3 or 4 days. So
right.
it's definitely easier said than done. And one of the things that the most successful women who changed focus on was changing their mindset. Definitely changing their mindset and looking forward,
Hmm.
not backward. And they all use different tools to do it. Some of us might just go on a vacation, just change your environment, and you
Yes.
change what you're thinking about and how you're
Sure.
thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Some used vision boards to really find out
Hmm.
what they're thinking. I've heard you say you're a journalist, and so writing is part of processing. And if you process by writing, you do that. If you're somebody who is maybe in their early 20s, you're going to want to make a you video on your phone and talk to yourself and play it back to yourself, because you're
Right.
you're more visually
Yes.
inspired in that way.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
whatever you can do really to give yourself that breathing space, what you described, having your
Mhm.
mind rest, is very, very important.
Yes. And I would also say this, and I'll give an example. Go do something
Mhm.
for somebody else. So
Absolutely.
my little example, which has turned into a big thing, is I have been helping to feed the homeless.
Oh,
And
that's wonderful.
it wasn't a planned thing. I was asked by somebody at a local donut shop if my daughter and I would donate the donuts at the end of the day to the homeless, because they had so many, and I'm talking hundreds. So I couldn't say no, because why would I do that? I mean, it just seemed obvious thing to do. So the next day I donated them, and then I went back to the Dunkin' Donuts. I told them where the items went. He says, well, if you
Yeah.
want to come back as often as possible. And this turned into me spending yesterday unloading. My car was packed with food. And
Wow.
so I kept thinking, I have so much work to do. I have to get home and write. So I thought, well, what are you learning about this experience right now, donating this food and seeing the people in Orange County who are really hurting right now in the pandemic? What are you learning, Janine? What are the moments that you could share with the readers? What kind of article could you write? So even though my mind was taking time off, it wasn't, but I was trying to think of the bigger picture.
I love that. You're absolutely right. Giving is a wonderful way of getting outside of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily uh, thinking of what you're giving, just doing it,
Just
just
doing
just
it.
giving all the
Yeah.
time. I'm in the field of philanthropy and nonprofit. So most of us, and it's always hard to stereotype, are mission driven. And so giving and helping is sort of part of our DNA. But I love the fact that you did it. And then you were thinking about what you could give to others as a lesson
As a
from
lesson.
doing, as a learning.
Right.
And that's a wonderful way to be. It really
I
is.
think it's so important right now, Robin, to be empathetic and kind.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think I know. And I actually started this initiative called How to Become a Better Human. And it's a care initiative, and it has to do with connection, the power of connecting to people, even total
Mhm.
strangers. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm loving the conversations with the employees of the donut shop. I love hearing what they have to say,
That's great.
you know? And I always feel like mental health is very important. So that's
Yes.
the attention part. Obviously, we're in a mental health pandemic. Being resilient and then educating ourselves on things we don't know that we need to know.
And, one of the most interesting things that happens, and it's happened to everyone when they lose their job, is they are so surprised by the people who come to their aid they never even knew existed before.
Yeah.
When they're feeling down, I say, just go back and read those lovely emails, those lovely cards from people that you didn't even know knew about you, or
Yes.
cared about you, or
Yes.
cared about you. And it's as if the universe opens up. And I say, I don't want to get too out there for all you corporate minded women, but it is as if if you allow it, the universe opens up, people appear that
Yes.
can help you,
Yes.
and you hear from people that can help you, and you connect with people.
Yes.
And in terms of empathy, I was really surprised when I was talking to one of my former staff members about recognition, which is, another form of that. It is a form of valuing people. And I was surprised when she said, you didn't even know me, and you passed me in the hallway and I wasn't feeling well, and you stopped and said, "Are you okay?"
Wow.
And that meant so much to her that she remembered it 3.5 years later. I didn't remember it. It was just that kind of, that urge to be empathetic and,
Yes.
as you say, to be human
Yes.
with others.
Right. Because people are hurting in so many different ways, and people of all ages, they've lost internships and jobs, younger
Yes.
generations.
Yes.
They've missed milestones. There's so much research on their mental health. They're socially isolated. And then older adults are feeling socially isolated and suffering in different ways as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's true. And isolation, whenever you have a loss or a trauma, or you feel as if in the job loss world that it was your fault, people will tend to self-isolate.
Right.
And that's very hard mentally. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is to show women, when you're feeling this is valid. This is your right to feel this way. And everybody else felt that way. And they expressed it differently, but you're not alone. You're part of a community. And so, I've read a lot on this topic, and any of us can read, oh, well, if you've lost your job, go to a coach, write your resume this way, take a Myers-Briggs test, do all of that stuff. And the fact is that there's still so much anger and sadness and loss to process that sometimes we're just not ready for that. Right. And when women express how they felt, how they really felt, like, I went home and I sat in my kitchen for 8 hours. I didn't change my clothes. I sat there for 8 hours until my partner came. I crawled into bed with my prayer beads and didn't get out of bed until 2 days later. All of those kinds of things. And then you see these same women process and really become somebody new and somebody stronger. Yes. But community is really important to mental health strength, let's call it, and stamina. We're not expected to know what to do. We're just not, even if we knew what to do in every other aspect of our life. It's like when you become a parent, there is no manual for that. Right. You can read lots of books, but there you are with your child, and no one's written about what you're facing that moment with your child. Exactly. And so you have to be able to be resilient and creative, and to trust yourself that what you're doing is the best thing you can do in that moment. Yes.
And if somebody reaches out to you and they're looking for advice or just to have a conversation, be open to that, because absolutely, I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn, so many people, and it's important to take the time to connect, because if they get a little bit of an idea, they can maybe find some new meaning and purpose in their life because of that conversation, a new trajectory. And we need to make the time for people. That's very kind of you. And I had someone connect with me on LinkedIn, and she said, "How can I help?" And I wrote back, "That's my favorite question.
That's my favorite question. Here's how you can help, and here's how I can help you back.
Yeah, exactly. What else would you like people to know about your book?
I think that they should know that it is chock full of what I call sound bites of advice, so that you can flip through it and go back at any moment to be shorn up and, to what you might need at that time. So I'll give you an example. Women have a tendency to think we can fix things. We want to move quickly. We want to do everything we can to change the situation. And one piece of advice that I give is don't confuse moving quickly with moving forward.
Great.
Slow down, take the time.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is just remember the qualities that you had in the role don't disappear the minute the job does.
Yes.
You're the same person you were that morning when somebody called you up and said, how are you doing, Janine? How, okay. And so it's chock full of those elements. It also coins a new phenomenon that I call being faux fired.
Faux fired?
Faux fired. That's when women essentially fire themselves by staying in an untenable situation, trying to fix it. The hires up just keep throwing more and more obstacles in their way, or they in one case they take credit for all the good things, and they lay all the bad things at the foot of the woman. And then the women march in and they tell them everything they thought, and then they say they're fired. They quit. And it's like, well, congratulations, you saved them the task of firing yourself. And really, making women and all of us more aware of those dynamics, so that you don't end up faux firing yourself. You end up preparing for your next move, and not sort of, gritting your teeth and trying to get beyond it because you're right and they're wrong and you're right.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Where can people find out more about you?
So they can go to my website, theprofessionalguy.com, and they can order the book on Amazon, on the independent store bookshop. They can also come and join my launch. I'm having a virtual book launch on October 19th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Great.
And they will actually hear the true stories of women who were in the book. One is still disguised. She's chose to keep her anonymity. Okay. And the other one is now the CEO of her own branding company after she was faux fired 3 years ago. And they'll also hear from an executive recruiter who really has the inside track on hearing from people when they're fired, what the firing managers say was their reason, what's the most common reason that people say firings occur, and how you can avoid making mistakes when you're at that vulnerable part.
I know it must be really challenging. That's an understatement, having a book come out in the pandemic, but because you really resonated with the fact that a lot of people have lost jobs.
Yes.
Or it hasn't been in their control. Perhaps businesses have been, shut down. I think the timing is great. I also think I like what you said earlier, how, this is a time many women are becoming entrepreneurs.
Yes. Yes. And there's a big difference between becoming an entrepreneur out of necessity and becoming an entrepreneur because you see a vision, you have an opportunity. And this is like somewhere in between, where there's more and more entrepreneurship and support services and support organizations for women who are doing this and are stepping forward. Yeah, I know at least three women immediately who have done this, and that's just me. I mean, and then I go online and I see there are hundreds of women who are doing this.
So the name of my show is Get the Funk Out, right?
I do. I do.
Okay. So a good thing you know, because I thought, what a perfect book, because so many women who lose their jobs, they're in a major funk. And
Yes.
this is just so relevant. Let me just give the name of the book again. Involuntary Exit, A Woman's Guide to Thriving After Being Fired. I want to thank you so much
Thank you,
for taking
Janine.
the time to chat with me.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.